Hello, and welcome to Holistic Ambition, where we talk with visionary leaders who are redefining what it means to be ambitious. We cover ways you can live with more well-being, meaning, and fun in your career, business, and relationships. I'm your host, Stephanie Thoma, career coach for ambitious professionals and author of Confident Introvert. Today, we have Sydney with us. Sydney Lych is an entrepreneur, business owner, and transformational keynote speaker who started her journey 8 years ago. She has driven a health company with over 7,000 active customers and multiple 8-figure global sales organizations, speaking on more than 100 stages worldwide. Sydney empowers individuals through her identity deconstruction method, guiding them to shed societal conditioning and rediscover their true selves. With the support of ancient and spiritual practices and her mentor, Mitch, she helps people find peace and fulfillment within their authentic selves. Oh my goodness. So can you tell us, we'll just dive in, identity deconstruction. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on here. I'm so excited. So excited to be on here. So I actually got started, like I said, very young in entrepreneurship. And with that, I was part of an organization and a sales team where living up to certain ways of being and ways of operating became very prevalent. A lot of women experience this in entrepreneurship, in business, right? They have to act like the guys. They have to start, dyeing their hair a certain color, looking a certain way, presenting themselves, they feel in a certain way. And I found that was in my early 20s, something that I fell prey to very easily. And I dove into, coloring my hair. And then it turned into getting my nails done in a way that I never would have gotten them done. And then it turned into getting Botox, getting filler, right? Going down this whole rabbit hole of constructing an identity truly based on insecurities and things that weren't actually true for me. And so it got to a point where a couple of years ago, I made my way to a teacher, Mitch, like I mentioned in my bio. And he is an ancient spiritual guru. And I started to sit with him every week for about 3 hours. And over time, the things that I used to tie my identity into, the way that I looked, the way I presented myself, the way I spoke, the way I operated in life, I realized it was a show. It was a show that was not authentically me. And in the time sitting with him, I started to deconstruct that identity by, different practices, meditations, and it kind of just started to fall away. And so I realized how powerful it was to no longer wrap my identity in the way that I looked, wrap my identity up in the way that I looked. And so, over the course of time, I've been able to share that journey with a lot of other people. But it's something that's actually newer and really exciting for me to be able to emerge and share. I was very into coaching business, working with people in business, hardcore driving all the time. And I came to this place finally where I was like, what is the true me? What do I actually want with my life? Right? Asking those very esoteric questions. And identity deconstruction has really become like the main pinnacle of that, of how can we deconstruct the identities that we borrowed to cover up the feeling that we're not worthy, not lovable, not good enough. And that's what deconstruction of the identity means to me, is how can we deconstruct that, see what's left, and then from there build up what's our actual personality like? What do we actually care about? What do we actually value? Instead of what does Instagram tell me I should value, all of that. So it's really coming home to what I call true nature, your true self, ego removed, and realizing that we're inherently beautiful without all of that and being okay with none of it, you know?
Yeah. And, I want to ask you about becoming unpretty, but before, I've actually been doing a lot of, writings and things on my own about these concepts of creating yourself and being yourself and how they can kind of be at odds where it's like, and some would even say that to be successful, you need to kind of play the part, know when to bite your tongue, know when to speak, and sort of follow this script that maybe gets you to a point where then you're allowed to be authentic. What do you have to say to that?
I believe that there's merit depending on it depends on what you're optimizing for, right? Are you optimizing to climb the ladder? And if it is your goal to do that, that's okay. Own it. However, I don't believe that, I don't want to say what I don't believe. I do believe that if we own our truth from the very get-go, from the very beginning, with whatever we do, and we never compromise who we actually are despite the outside circumstances, people will either accept that or they won't. And if whatever value that you truly have, being your true authentic self, cannot be a value in this container, then it needs to go be a value in a different container, a different job, a different role. Because what we do as women, especially, is we mold and we change and we shape and we form to fit into other people's boxes, where men don't do that as often, right? Men just show up and they're them. And if people don't like it, they leave and they go do the next thing. With women, we're so afraid of rejection and being, disliked, that we change who we are. And this is something my mentor Mitch told me when he went to get his psychology degree at Naropa. He shared, he was like, I didn't change who I was when I went there, and it stirred the pot. And a lot of people didn't like it, and they almost kicked me out. But at the end, they actually valued it and they saw how important it was. And it actually was able to change the culture at a college. And so I think that if we're willing, like the people who change the world are the ones who are willing to just be themselves. And I think that if you want to optimize for being in a very specific industry, first of all, ask yourself why if you can't be yourself, right? And ask yourself if it's really that important for you to be yourself. If it's not, go for it. But for me, I could do that and it worked until it didn't. And once it didn't really, really hard. And it was really hard to have to undo that and then say, okay, what's the next direction? What's the next move? So it really depends on what you're optimizing for. But I think being yourself from the get-go, especially as a woman, and owning that, there's so much power in it. And people will actually start to shape and shift around you, which is really, really powerful when you own your truth.
And something that you brought up is there's this popular book right now, The Courage to be Disliked.
Love
And
that book.
right, I recently finished that as well. And I'm curious about how your journey has been of your own experience of feeling likable versus not, and how that has shifted over time.
That's such a great question. I've never been asked that before, but I had so much identity wrapped up in being liked. Like I was like, I need to be loved by everyone. And it was horrible people pleaser. And that was a big part of what I had to undo. It was like, I put on a show. I literally put on the mask every time I left the house. And what that resulted in was me being very liked by a lot of people. But what happened when someone didn't like me is I was not okay. I was a wreck. I was destroyed. And for me, that's what I'm really trying to help people do, is realize that if you own who you are and you're truthful to that, then whatever anybody else is doing around you literally will not affect you if you're stable in you. And if people don't like you, I truly think that's important, and that's okay. And because if you're not getting hate, you're not playing a very big game. You're not trying to change anything. You're not trying to speak your voice. You're not trying to rock the boat, right? There's probably going to be people who talk crap about the book I'm writing, right? Becoming Unpretty and this whole philosophy, because there'll be something to poke holes in, and that's okay. I invite that. But I used to not. And I know a lot of women, it's really, really difficult as well. Because we've been, told from very early ages to be like a princess and to be perfect and to never do anything that, disturbs others. And if you do, then you'll be liked, and then you'll be rewarded with, a husband and happily ever after. But, I just don't think, I think if women can really step into being disliked and being polarizing, and not for the sake of being polarizing, but really standing up for what they believe in, I think it's really important. And I think it'll change the world a lot.
Yeah. And, you mentioned Becoming Unpretty, this movement, this book. Can you tell us about what that means?
Yes. So, I mean, becoming unpretty, becoming on anything, right? It could be anything. For me, it was a identity deconstruction that had a lot to do with the way that I looked. Even showing up to this call, I don't have like face makeup on. That never would have happened before. I would have been full on glam, getting ready for 2 hours to be on a 30-minute Zoom. Now I can show up and I can be myself, and I don't have to, be a certain way. And for some people, it's removing a certain piece of their personality that's just trying to people please others. Becoming unpretty is not easy, right? The idea, again, becoming on anything, it's removing the show from our lives. It's removing the need to be externally validated by men. It's removing the need for anything that's outside of ourselves to make us okay, to make us feel worthy, to make us feel loved. And when we can, again, strip that all away, that's the process of becoming unpretty, is removing all those identities we picked up along the way that we put in place to protect ourselves and to avoid feeling the feelings that are under there of, I don't feel worthy, so I'm going to go buy this thing. I'm going to, I feel unworthy, so I'm going to go cover my face with makeup. I feel unworthy, so I'm going to go, dye my hair, whatever, examples. And the process of becoming unpretty leaves what's inherently lovely, which is our true nature, which is our authentic self behind the ego. And then again, building from that place, sky's the limit, but building from that place of a solid foundation rather than a shaky, wobbly, I feel unworthy, I feel unloved, therefore I'm going to go spend all my money on stuff that isn't actually going to make me happy, but I think that it will. And so it's helping people realize they don't need anything to be okay. And when they can actually get to that place, which takes a lot of effort and a lot of work, it's magical. And I've seen it happen many, many times with the people my mentor sits with,
Yeah, and there's, when it comes to, it sounds like there's this sort of redirection of focus from how one is externally showing up to how one is internally showing up. And I'm curious, from the perspective of a support system, would you say that it's mandatory or necessary or helpful to have certain key players in place in your life, let's say as you embark upon a journey of becoming unpretty, becoming less likable in how you show up, whether that be certain friends or family relationships?
Yes, for sure. And I think it's definitely a process, especially the one I take people through in the book. It's a process that is very solo, right? It's a very solo journey. But I think for me, what it more so was, it was, hey, letting my friends know I might be off the grid a little bit. I might not respond to your calls and your texts as much. I get to go internal and focus on what I need to focus on right now, because this is what I'm doing. And the people who supported me in that, it was like, those are the real homies, right? Those are the real friends and people that I want in my life. And I've been very blessed to have a lot of people who have, again, gone through this same deconstruction process. Not a ton, but very few. And they were the ones who inspired me. And so I was very lucky in that way to have a kind of a built-in support system, but that's also something that I really desire to build, is a group of women or a group of men who are going through this deconstruction process, really realizing what's really important to them, what are their real goals, what are their real ambitions, what are they really looking to do with their life, and being able to come together with those people is so helpful. So yes, finding a support system is huge. Again, I'm someone you can reach out to for that if you don't have anybody in your life, which is most likely the case. It just is, with the way that the world is right now,
Yeah. And, I'm I'm sensing there's aspects of, shadow work for those that are in that world that use that language, dark night of the soul, where maybe
Yeah.
that change needs to happen. And yeah, maybe your friends and family are kind of like, peace. And then you get to figure this stuff out on your own. So, when it comes to mindset, I know you talk about mindset of excellence. Can you share a bit about that?
Yeah, I think totally dark night of the soul. There's definitely but what's interesting with that, I want to say something on that, because there is a lot of that, I guess you could say, in its own unique way. I think we put a very positive spin on it, but I called it my Christmas pajama pants and my no makeup era, where I was just like, I couldn't even get out of my Christmas pajamas and I never wore makeup. I was just in the house, internal the whole time. But the cool thing about the deconstruction process is that when you get to the place where you are in the dark night of the soul, you've done so much work on yourself that you still feel okay, because the whole goal is to make you feel okay no matter what the external or internal circumstances are. And so with that, it's a very much more positive spin on like shadow work and things like that. As far as a mindset of excellence, I think that it can sometimes sound not hypocritical, but opposite of what I teach, because I'm very much about like newly deconstructing processes, deconstructing ways of being to kind of not need anything. but I also have another side of me that's very ambitious, and I love to hustle and I love to work. I used to be known as the girl who literally never stopped working and never stopped crushing it and breaking records and hitting goals. And so that's a huge piece of me as well. And so when I talk about the mindset of excellence, I think the dichotomy that I have is, what's the come from? When you're showing up in your work, right? When you have your deconstruction process, and then you're like, okay, I did it. I released all the masks. I don't have any identities that I'm needing to attach to. What's true for me? What's still true for me? Because it could still be true that you want to hustle and grind your ass off in work, right? It doesn't mean that you just stop doing anything and you're lazy. And so for me, having my deconstruction process, I was actually able to come out the other side and have even more of a mindset of doing things in the absolute most excellent way that I could, because I realized how sacred life is. And I realized how sacred each individual that I connect with is, where before I just kind of treated people like numbers, right? And I was just kind of doing my things and going on autopilot. And I think with mindset, the best spiritual leaders, the best teachers I've ever seen, they know all of these truths that I teach. Steve Jobs, Muhammad Gandhi, right? Mother Teresa, like all these people have gone through probably very similar deconstruction processes, and they operate in excellence. They operated in excellence. And so I think that's a huge piece that some people will come out the other end of shadow work. And then they're like, well, what's the point of any of it? Right. And that's a very, what I call in Sanskrit, it's a tamastic way, or a tamasic way of operating, which is lazy, dull, bored, inactive, just completely disinterested in life. And that is not true enlightenment, if you will, on the other end of becoming unpretty. The true enlightenment is having that mindset of excellence in everything that we do and bringing our absolute best and bringing our heart into everything that we do.
Yes, and I'm sensing this, it definitely goes beyond aesthetics, obviously, if listeners haven't gathered that already. And when it comes to this concept of creating a sense of peace, that seems like a common thread of being at peace with what is, understanding what is, and being able to not seek out being this disruptive player, but maybe inherently being that and being okay with it. Can you tell us about this concept that you have of no story, no problem?
Yes. Yes. So what I love about no story, no problem, it's actually a concept that my mentor, he says, we don't have a problem here. And I love to share this with women, especially because, every human being, we have problems in our life, right? We're 90% of our thoughts every day are negative, because we're just like animals running around on planet Earth with computers and technology. And so we all have problems in our life. Our brain is wired to solve problems. But what I found is, again, in ancient lineages, the mind is actually, it's not evil, it's not bad, but it really isn't helping us much if 90% of our thoughts are negative, right? We're searching for the negative. And so if instead we don't allow the mind to control us and we allow it to just flow, right? Where we have thoughts that come through and we just name the thought instead of attach to the thought and then go down the rabbit hole, right? I see women all the time. They're like, the boy didn't text me back after the date. And it's like, he could have died. He could have lost his phone. You literally don't know what happened to him, but you take that one thought. Oh, I'm unworthy. I'm not lovable. Oh my God, I gotta go to the gym. I gotta lose weight. And we take this thought and we start to spiral. And then we're like, I'm not good enough. I'm unworthy. I'm fat. I'm ugly. I should just give up on life, right? Because one guy didn't call us back.
Mm.
When you have the higher perspective and true peace, and knowing that no matter what happens, you are okay, you have a higher perspective of like, we're spinning on a ball in the middle of the universe. Somehow we don't fall off of this earth. We just kind of stay on the earth. We're spinning around. Like, we don't have a problem here. And if I don't tell myself the story that's attached to that thought that just came into my mind of, oh, this boy didn't call me back, I'm unworthy, it's just a negative thought. It's just a thought. You are not your thought, right? It's just a thought. And when we can detach from the thoughts that we have and realize that they're just that, they're just thoughts, we don't need to identify with them. We can just honor them. We can listen to them. We can say, thank you for that, and send it off. Then we don't have a problem here. And if we're not attaching the story to it, we don't have a story, we don't have a problem. And when we just kind of release those stories, we really don't have a problem. And again, it's that higher perspective. And yeah, again, when you're at the place where you have just that spiritual peace, it's like anything anybody does can't shake you. A message on Slack can't shake you. Some, intimidating man at work can't shake you. Another woman talking shit about you can't shake you, because you're just confident in who you are and you don't need anything to be okay.
I love all of those nuggets and sort of downloads there. And a lot of what you touched on has to do with leadership, like owning yourself and perhaps being able to lead other people as a woman in the world. So can you talk with us about leadership as a female founder?
Yes. Like, what wants to be said here? I think with women, there gets to be a stepping into owning of the way that we operate as women, because we are not men. And I think a lot of times women operate in business and in leadership like men because we're in a mostly male environment. Like, I get it. And I think that there's like a new age happening of women taking over the world, right? I don't think men or women are superior to each other, but I think that the way things are trending, the femininity is really rising, and we're showing each other and ourselves that we can operate from the feminine and be very effective, if not more effective, right? Having soft skills, very effective, right? That wasn't 20 years ago. And women are relatively new in the workforce. If you really think about it, like, women couldn't have a credit card without their husband signing until 1972. Like, it was very recent that we could even have land or could have rights, right, to vote. It's very recent. And so I think as we're starting to really step in and take majority in even certain companies, it's important to own and to shift the culture and change it to the way that we would like for it to be. I think a lot of women kind of just settle and they just kind of stay meek and they hide. And that's tying it back to what I was talking about before, where it's like, be willing to not be liked and be willing to own what's true for you. Because when you do, at first there might be resistance, but people will follow suit if you have those standards of how you operate and what you do in the work world. As far as leadership, I think, it all comes back to owning truth and operating from the heart. I think it's a really big shift that we're having as female founders, female CEOs, female bosses, managers, whatever it may be. Can we lead from the heart and be kind? We don't always have to be super nice, right? But we can be kind to each other and loving instead of operating from this very masculine, dominated world. I always just think of the movie Barbie that came out, right? It's like such a good play on what a world could look like, as funny as it is, if women ran the world and if there was more of a feminine approach to the way that we operated. And I think that all starts on the individual level and with leadership.
Yeah. And I love that you bring up this concept that, basically, I'm curious when it comes to selling from a social perspective, soul-led selling, how would you describe that?
I think it's so I'll give a little context. There's a term that I call the wanter. And the wanter, everyone has it. It's the first, sign that we're a human being. We all have the wanter. It's kind of like the ego, right? The wanter needs 4 things to survive. It needs water or hydration, oxygen, nourishment, and warmth. And when we're born, right, the wanter revs up, it starts crying, it needs warmth, it needs oxygen, it needs food, it needs all these things. And as we get older, the wanter that we have within all of us, it doesn't make us bad or anything, but it extends and it wants more and it wants more. And it wants the cool bike with the handlebars. And then it wants the new car when it's 16. And then it wants the love. It wants the attention. It wants fill in the blank. And so we all have this aspect of the wanter within us. And what I see a lot on social media is we're selling to people's wanters, right? We're saying, hey, your wanter's probably insecure that, for me, my eyebrows look like this right now and I haven't gotten them done in a while. And so I'm going to sell you this thing to make you feel like your eyebrows are not good enough. And if you get your eyebrows done, you will be good enough and your wanter will rest. And once your wanter rests, you will be happy. But the nature of the wanter is always to want. And so the wanter can never be happy. The wanter can't love, the wanter can't like, the wanter's job is to want. And so if we're operating from that place, whether we're selling or buying things, it's an insatiable quest and we'll never find true and lasting fulfillment or peace. And so the more we're operating as a society and a culture from the wanter, the more disturbances there are, I'll just say. And
Right.
so, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say, and there seems to be a parallel with this sort of stereotypical or surface level vision of being a woman, which is, without watching the movie Barbie, right? Just looking at Barbie, be like, oh, that's a woman.
Yep.
Whereas it's really about those qualities underneath the surface. And not to say that you can't have both, but it sounds like there's a large emphasis in your work on, okay, if you've been so focused on the surface level things of, success is buying this purse, or beauty is having this hair color or lip color, then it's about sort of getting down to more of the fundamental aspects of not just what you want for the sake of this insatiable wanting continuum, but something deeper that's sustainable and actually connects you with people.
Yes. And when you're selling, if you're in, sales or you have a product or service, which is probably most people listening to this, you can also not sell to the wanter.
Mm-hmm.
That's whole soul-led selling, not selling to people's wanters. It's shooting them straight and actually wanting to help them with a problem, right? And not, oh, I'm going to make them feel insecure in my marketing so that I can manipulate them and strategize on how they can buy from me, right? When you just come from your soul and your heart, and you're passionate about what it is that you do, and you actually believe deep down that it can help people, people feel that. People feel that all day, and people will buy from you. And you'll be surprised if you shift your way of operating from used car salesman trying to get your money to operating from your soul when you're selling and not selling to people's wanters, and just being aware of that, it'll shift a lot.
And gosh, there's so much great stuff that you've brought up, and I'm sure there's more, but as we wrap up, I'm curious, how do you define ambition?
It's so difficult because it's so unique to each person. I would say ambition is notably working towards something that's important to you. But I'll add in that you don't need to be okay. So it's working towards something for the sake and the love of working towards it, not for the outcome of what you're going to get.
That intrinsic value. And what does holistic ambition mean to you?
Being a two-winged bird rather than a one-winged bird. Not just living in the logical side of the world, but also living in the spiritual side of the world and strengthening both of those so that your bird can fly.
Amazing. I love this holistic view that you have, and all of the different visuals and metaphors for whether the people are tuning in, listening to us, watching us. I think that this has been such a fun conversation and with a lot of depth. And how can people stay connected with you, learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, Instagram is usually the easiest place. So at Sydney Lych, Lich. And then I'll also be you can go to my website, sydneylich.com. And I'll have my Becoming Unpretty available for pre-order here in a couple months, which will be very exciting. So you guys can go grab that as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Sydney. And thank you at home for watching. Subscribe to be the first to know of the next speaker in our Holistic Ambition series. Until next time.
Thanks.